Welcome to Quex Gardens in the month of June. During June, the fountain garden has undergone the first phase of its planting restoration. The beds we cleared in the winter months have now been resized and turf laid. This garden has seen many changes over the years. When this photograph was taken, about 1860, this garden was a perfect Italianate feature with balustrade wall and steps down to gravel paths around a small fountain pond. Later in the 19th century, when the mansion was extended, this balustrading appears on the roof, and the wall has now gone. There are still neat beds. In the early 20th century, the pond had a different function and became a reservoir for a firefighting system in the house. This extended pond was much larger and deeper and involved building a pump house nearby. Today, we have been busy reshaping the beds around the fountain area. You can see here how much we've turfed them in to make smaller and manageable features. The first two have been done. Next year, we hope to have the second two in place. Hopefully by then we'll also reveal the gravel paths which I believe are still under the turf. Taken in 1913, this image shows the statues newly installed in the centre of the pond. It also shows the Four Seasons statues standing around the perimeter. One of these has been returned to us recently, and although in pieces, we hope to have it put back together and on show for visitors in the future. We are currently sourcing funding to rebuild the height of the pond and to have the statues restored, so that they once again run over the surface of the water. We're still not sure how the early fountain worked at Quex. Normally you need a large volume of water high up to create the pressure for a fountain to work, and without electricity this is how many of them were done. We do, however, have a large number of huge trees in this area, and we also know from our records that some of these trees were there many years ago. It could be that a large tank of water was placed high up in one of the trees. Under the copper beech, now, you can see the remains of the pump house which was used to pump water from the pond and up into the mansion house. Hydrants can still be seen on the walls in there today. Now the fountain beds have settled into their full summer colour. Gradually, as the dahlias come out, there should be a blaze of pink round here. And it gives a sense of how formal this area could now become. The rose border is in full colour throughout June. With the herbaceous border behind it, this area of the garden has given a splendid show for the visitors. The herbaceous border is where there were once glass houses. Known as peach cases, these narrow frames stood along this south-facing wall and were quite an early feature of glass at Quex. They disappear in the early part of the 20th century, and by the 1930s we know there was a herbaceous border here. Throughout June I tend to cut the hedge back hard along this edge, which will give a sharp formality to the rose border on the other side. When the rose garden was replanted, it has a phasing of colour, very similar to the planting of Gertrude Jekyll. We're lucky to have some very old garden structures here at Quex. This structure, known as the figwam, is a covered dome made of metal with a very old fig growing all over it. This was mentioned in an article written in 1902, as were the holm oaks growing next to it. Another feature at the other end of what we call the croquet lawn is a sephora tree. This too has an ironwork structure around it and is also mentioned in the article. The sephora has outgrown it now and gives a beautiful show of drooping branches. The walled garden's been very productive throughout June. Here in the cucumber pit, the cucumbers have produced a great tally. By the end of the month we've picked 100. We've grown cucumbers in the middle section, underplanting them with pepper and aubergine plants. When the sun is very strong, the cucumber leaves droop slightly as they are now, but soon recover, and the cucumbers hang down from the bars as they would have done in Victorian times. We've cleaned out the first section of the cucumber pit, and we're having a go at growing melons here. An old variety, known as Blenheim Orange, will quickly climb up these canes and scramble up to the roof space. In the main glass houses, the pelargoniums are giving a fine show, reaching right up to the roof. And on wetter and duller days we've been able to get in here and clean out all the weeds. In the first section the tomatoes are doing very well. The tagetes flowering underneath the tomatoes have attracted a huge number of hoverflies, and these are keeping the whitefly away.